This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
South African Airways meets with unions for talks to end a crippling strike. Uganda's president calls on the EU to provide financial support for hosting refugees. And on World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims, we look at efforts to reduce road accidents in Africa. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. Nigeria's central bank releases $1.7 billion as a loan facility for farmers in the country. And in sports, Uganda hosts Malawi in the second round of qualifiers after a draw against Burkina Faso. In our top story, South African Airways and labour unions have met for their first round of mediated talks. This comes after more than 3,000 workers, including cabin crew, technical and ground staff, launched an open-ended strike. The troubled state-run carrier hopes to end the crippling strike that it says could push it to collapse. The industrial action has forced the carrier to ground hundreds of flights, costing it $3 million a day. Unions representing more than half of SAA's workforce called the strike on Friday. Mediated talks on Saturday were headed up by a resolution body, the Commission for Conciliation, Mediation and Arbitration. The union's demands include an 8% wage increase and an objection to SAA's plans to cut over 900 jobs. Workers say the strike will continue until their demands are met.
We cannot have the board that we have now. They don't have a plan. Quite frankly, we believe they don't know what they're doing. We need a board whose interest is to turn around South African Airways. And we cannot continue in this way. We need people that are capable of actually turning this airline around. We've got 11,000 employees live that we're holding at SAA. So this is more than just an 8% fight. It's also fighting for the survival of this company. The only way we know how to do it as Labour is to stand out here and demonstrate, strike.
Well, let's go live now to Johannesburg. CGTN's Angelo Coppola joins us with the very latest. Angelo, day 3 of the workers' strike. What is the latest you can tell us on what is happening at the moment?
Lindy, directly behind me, a briefing is about to start. We've been speaking to union leadership and they've given us an insight into what happened during that meeting yesterday with management at the CCMA. Bottom line is that management didn't move. In fact, they tried to stall the talks by trying to introduce a third union, the NMT union, which is not part of the strike discussion and is not on strike, in fact. There was also no movement on the salary or the wage negotiation figure of 8%. They're offering 5.6%. And also on insourcing, which is something that the NUM are trying to push, or should I say that NUMSA are trying to push through. It's around 25 billion rands worth of procurement that they're looking to insource. They say that's where they're going to be saving money. We also now understand that the union is going to be seeking secondary strike notices in an attempt to close down the entire aviation sector. They have, we're told, already got a strike certificate at Comair, which is another airline that operates into the SAA chain. And they're also talking to the likes of AXA, the airports company, as well as other union memberships within different parts of that SAA food chain. So if they get this right and the other union members in those other businesses get strike notices, we could see the entire aviation sector in South Africa close down. So it's a little touch and go at the moment. We do know Comair has a strike certificate, which could impact the local domestic airlines. Lindy?
So the aviation sector in South Africa facing a very real strike threat that would have a very crippling effect. Angelo, we understand that SAA is trying at this stage to resume its international flights. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, we understand that there was only one scheduled flight to fly out today. So it's convenient that SAA announces the resumption of international flights with only one airline, and that's the flight to Sao Paulo, which was due to leave at around 10:30. When we checked last on the tracking service, that flight left on schedule. The issue there, though, is the fact that any staff on board of that flight has to be managed by a senior cabin crew person, somebody who's in senior management, in fact, in that sector. So we don't know who's actually on the flight and whether that flight is properly regulated and properly constituted. So that's for today. Of course, we do know that the domestic flights are happening, but any overflow, of course, on the domestic flights is being taken up by the likes of Mango, which is the cheap option on the SAA, menu, as it were. And then obviously the people that were flying SAA will then be accommodated on other airlines within South Africa if there's space. So one flight took off, Sao Paulo, confirmed, but no domestic flights yet. Lindy?
And Angela, just turning our attention to some other news coming out of South Africa, we understand the National Union of Mineworkers is expected to hold a rally in Marikana today. What is this about?
Well, the NUM have for several years now been losing members to AMCU, specifically in the platinum sector, but also in the gold mining sector, because there the gold mines have started retrenching, started downscaling the operation. So any members that were part of the NUM at that point who have been retrenched obviously can't afford their membership, so have since left the union altogether. We do know that the drive, and they're quite open about this, the NUM are in Marikana, not at Wonderkop where the massacre happened, but in the town hall several kilometers away. They're on a rally to try and drive membership back to NUM. And we spoke with the AMCU leadership a little while ago, and I asked them if they're going to be getting involved in that meeting at all, or whether any of their members are going to be going across to maybe disrupt the meeting, and I was given an emphatic no. So as it stands right now, it's really a membership drive by the NUM, and they were trying to obviously get some of government members involved. They tried to get Ramaphosa, for example, to attend. He didn't make it. So as it stands right now, that meeting is about to happen. We'll keep you posted if there are any developments there, Lindy.
All right, thank you so much. Angela Coppola live with us there from Johannesburg. Now let's go to the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo, where at least 15 civilians were killed in an attack by rebels from Uganda's allied democratic forces in the North Kivu region. United Nations radio and security officers say the attack took place in Mbao town at 2 a.m. on Saturday. The assailants reportedly used machetes and knives to attack residents. The rebels looted property from shops and homes, then set fire to the houses before fleeing into the forest. The ADF originated in Uganda in the 1990s. They were overpowered in that country and fled into the jungles of the DRC, from where they've caused havoc to neighboring areas. Meanwhile, the Democratic Republic of Congo's chief Ebola coordinator says he believes the deadly outbreak will be brought to an end by December this year. Professor Jean-Jacques Muyembe is optimistic that the disease will be contained given the recent reduction in new cases and the introduction of a second Ebola vaccine in the city of Goma. CGTN's Chris Ochamuringa has more.
A new Ebola vaccine is administered to residents in the DRC's eastern city of Goma. It's an experimental vaccine manufactured by U.S. firm Johnson & Johnson. The vaccine is being given to adults and children who are 1 year and older, living outside the areas with Ebola.
I came here voluntarily to get the new Ebola vaccine. I feel very good that I've got it. It has no problem at all.
Health workers are targeting 50,000 people in this busy trading hub that shares a border with Rwanda. Ebola has claimed close to 2,200 lives in North Kivu and Ituri provinces since its onset last August. But there's been a significant drop in new cases over the past 2 months. That has given DRC authorities reason to believe they are winning the fight against Ebola.
I think at the end of this month of November, we will be the outbreak will be totally under control. So we have to wait until the end of December to declare the end of the outbreak.
Some Congolese health officials have criticized the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, arguing that it hasn't been adequately tested. But the head of the DRC's Ebola response team dismisses their claims.
This is not a candidate vaccine that we can use without taking into account the recommendation of SAGE group. So I confirm that it is a good vaccine, and this vaccine is in use in other countries. So I find no problem to use it in DRC.
Johnson & Johnson says it proved the vaccine's efficacy after conducting clinical trials on more than 6,500 volunteers across the US, Europe and Africa. The new Ebola vaccine will be used alongside the one manufactured by US drug maker Merck to prevent the spread of the disease in the DRC. Health experts believe the two vaccines will have a greater impact in containing the deadly disease that has been confined to remote areas in the east of the country. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The United Nations High Commission for Refugees says it is facing a critical funding shortfall to meet the needs of refugees in Ethiopia. According to the agency, so far it has received about $204 million out of the approximate $347 million required to meet the basic nutritional needs, as well as education, health and accommodation needs of refugees in Ethiopia. As of October, the UNHCR registered over 700,000 asylum seekers in Ethiopia. About 70 million people are displaced worldwide, with Turkey hosting the highest number of refugees. Uganda hosts the largest refugee numbers in Africa, and Ethiopia comes in closely in second place. Well, in Uganda, the country's President Yoweri Museveni has called on the European Union to provide financial support for the hosting of refugees. Museveni says Uganda is grappling with providing social services to an influx of migrants. Just last month, the World Bank launched a report showing refugees in Uganda are suffering severe food shortages. CGTN's Isabel Nakiria has the details.
Thank you.
The World Bank report says many refugees in Uganda simply cannot afford food. About half the refugee population in Uganda are living in poverty, and many are unable to find work. Many refugees in Uganda live off handouts from aid agencies, which is not enough to survive on.
Therefore, policies that improve the self-reliance of refugees will not only enhance their living conditions, but also their ability to contribute productively to the Ugandan economy.
The Ugandan government, with help from humanitarian agencies, has invested in programs to help the needs of refugees. Refugees have been given aid, including seeds and training in farming skills to help them grow their own crops. But the World Bank says this isn't enough.
Self-reliance should continue to be at the center of policies and programs. This involves increasing the productivity of those already engaged in economic activities, as well as creating new opportunities.
The report does say new businesses started by refugees have boosted the local economy. But their small farms lack raw materials and are vulnerable to bad weather. The government says it will try to do more.
Issues of resilience of the refugees, self-reliance, skilling of both the refugees and the host communities, but also taking advantage of the available market, local economies, but involving the private sector being also key.
The World Bank Group recommends measures to improve the self-reliance of refugees and the communities that host them. This includes raising the productivity of agriculture by providing raw materials and skills, as well as creating jobs. The World Bank Group says even though Uganda has welcomed a large group of people, much more needs to be done to improve the well-being of refugees and host communities, The report calls on the international community to help support Uganda to provide a higher quality of life to refugees. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
Well, for more on this, we're now joined by Irene Nakisita in Kampala. She is the head of communications and public relations at the Uganda Red Cross Society. Irene, thank you so much for your time. Now, President Yoweri Museveni has called on the EU to help with financial support for refugees, saying the country is struggling to provide social services. What is the reality of the humanitarian situation for refugees?
Well, thank you for having me. What I can say is we are still receiving refugees into the country on top of the 1.3 million people that we already have. Majority of them coming from South Sudan and then followed by the Democratic Republic of Congo. And on a daily basis, we still have new cases of arrivals. And all these people require social services and humanitarian aid to be able to cope with the situation. And in any humanitarian setup, what we usually consider first is food, and then water, hygiene, and sanitation. And these are the biggest needs that impact greatly on people's health. So when we talk in terms of social services, we look at places like hospitals not being enough to be able to support all the refugees that are coming into the country. On top of the already existing refugees plus the hosting communities, they have to share the little resources that we already have. So in terms of water, we don't have enough water sources to accommodate all the people. In terms of food, there's not much food to feed all these people. As much as the government of Uganda allows refugees to have access to land to be able to till their own food, still the food is not enough. They can't grow enough food to feed themselves on the small pieces of land that they are given. But also the crops, rather the seeds, are not there for them to be able to have resilient seeds that they can grow over the season, considering that we have had a terrible weather in the past 6 months in the country. So we are still grappling with resources to be able to support these people. And as Red Cross, I'll speak on behalf of Red Cross, we are giving the little that we have, and we still need quite so much to be able to support this number of people that we are supporting in all the refugee settlements in the country.
Yes, and on that note, Irene, we know that various aid organizations are appealing for more money. How is the Red Cross coping with funding shortfalls?
Well, and I'll tell you this surprisingly, most of the agencies actually will work as long as there is money. But right now, I'll tell you, most of them have pulled down because of lack of resources. But Red Cross, with our mandate, we are always the first to be on ground and the last to leave. And I'll tell you, even as we are struggling, we are now relying entirely on the International Red Cross family members. Talk of the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent. We talk of the German Red Cross support, the Austrian Red Cross, some of these Red Cross partners coming in to support us, and a few UN agencies basically. But because of lack of funds, the UN funding is very, 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 very little. So we are entirely depending on our local capacity and then the International Red Cross support. But it's really coming in small bits, and we still need a lot. As long as refugees are still with us, we feel our mandate is not met as long as they still have needs, and we have not met them.
Irene, thank you so much for that, joining us there live from Kampala. Now, time for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. The UN Security Council extends a decades-long arms embargo on Somalia. And on World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims, we look at efforts to reduce road accidents in Africa.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe. reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Negotiations between Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam are taking shape in the Ethiopian capital of Addis Ababa. The water ministers of the three countries are deliberating on technical issues of the dam. Here's CGTN's Gurum Chala with more.
A strong spirit of cooperation has filled day one of the talks between delegations of Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan on the Grand Renaissance Dam of Ethiopia. Both ministers of water of Sudan and Egypt said it is high time to work hand in hand for the benefit of the three countries.
We came here to discuss with good faith, not only for the interest of Sudan, but also the interest of Ethiopia and the interest of Egypt. We would like to see the GERD as an opportunity to strengthen the cooperation among our people with the three countries.
I believe that any differences between us can be bridged, and I am sure that we can reach an agreement that is satisfactory to our three countries. This belief is based on the reality that the Nile River is an eternal bond, kinship between our countries and people.
The current technical talks on issues such as the timetable on the filling of the Grand Dam is one of the four similar upcoming negotiations. Representatives from the U.S. government and the World Bank are also in attendance as observers. Ethiopia's Minister of Water, Irrigation and Energy, Seleshi Bekele, explained the role of the observers.
As to the role of the observers, we expect the observers to attend our trilateral technical meetings that will be held between 15 November 2019 and to 15 January 2020, and to remain independent and impartial in the process. In the course of the meetings, observers may listen to the deliberations without interference in the conduct of the meetings.
Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam is close to 70% complete and will go fully operational by 2022. Guided by the 2015 Declaration of Principles, Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan have agreed to iron out their differences on several unresolved technical issues before 15th of January 2020. The next round of talks will be held in Cairo and Khartoum, one after the other. Grumjala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
The UN has extended a decades-long arms embargo against Somalia. Security Council members say despite recent progress, more must be done to ensure terrorist groups do not turn the country into a terrorist haven. From Mogadishu, here's CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilo with more.
Somalia's government has raised objections after the United Nations Security Council extended the mandate to a panel of experts for the sanctions regime in Somalia. 12 council members voted in favor of the resolution that, among other things, extends a decade-long arms embargo against the Horn of African nation. China, Russia and Equatorial Guinea abstained from voting.
We take a note with reservation on the just adopted resolution renewing the sanctions regime on Somalia. We regret that the important inputs have not been considered to reach consensus. The federal government of Somalia goes on record again in seeking the lifting of the sanctions imposed on Somalia since 1992.
Mogadishu argues that the report presented to the Security Council doesn't reflect the reality on the ground. Through its permanent representative to the UN, it warns that misleading reports undermine government's efforts of creating a strong security force capable of ending extremist attacks in the Horn of African nation.
The panel of experts continue to report false accusations, claims and gossip undermining our reform efforts and our fight against the terrorist group Al-Shabaab. The federal government of Somalia will not tolerate the naming of Somali individuals and business enterprises being named in the past, current or the future panel of experts reports without reasonable standard of proof. In that regard, to pave the way for future collaboration, we call for the establishment of the reliable mechanism to redress.
A partial lifting of arms import to Somalia was also extended by 12 more months. In 2013, the UN Security Council announced a partial lifting to allow the East African nation to purchase light weapons. Experts say recent Al-Shabaab threats in the country and beyond require strengthening the country's security forces. In recent months, an elite unit of the National Army has increased operations in the Lower Shabelle region, pushing out the insurgent group from its main operation bases.
At least the last 3 years, the figures show that they have been emboldened and more assertive, and the numbers says a lot in terms of the casualty that they have inflicted, both the civilians and the targets, which is mainly the AMISOM and the Somali security forces.
Mogadishu argues that if the arms embargo is likely to remain in place, eradicating Al-Shabaab will likely be a big challenge. It now wants international support in securing its borders to curb the flow of illegal weapons, foreign fighters and other vital resources from falling into the wrong hands. Abdulaziz Bilon, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
The 17th of November marks World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims. The day is in honor of the many millions killed and injured on the roads globally. The commemorations also highlight the tremendous burden and cost road accidents bear on families, communities and countries. Road traffic accidents kill an estimated 1.25 million people each year, 90% of them in middle and low-income countries. Such accidents are the leading cause of death among young people aged between 15 and 29. Almost half of all road traffic deaths are among pedestrians, cyclists and motorcyclists. Now, Uganda loses approximately 10 people per day in road traffic accidents. It is the highest road casualty rate in East Africa. To tackle the problem, authorities are intensifying efforts to ensure more drivers abide by the rules of the road. Leon Senyange reports.
It has been 3 weeks of learning. For Genevieve Apio, the driving lessons at this school have been an exciting experience.
It's not difficult. It's only about putting much effort in getting what the instructors are telling you.
Apio cannot wait to get onto the road on her own. After passing her test, she will have to apply for a complete driving permit. It takes about 3 weeks to process a new driving permit, but several drivers have put a car on the road and driven without any lessons or even a permit, and that is a big concern. Unregistered driving schools operate in the city, offering lessons and sometimes access to permits. It is these schools that are being faulted for several of the driver errors.
Yes, those are the major people causing the shortcuts. Those ones, if they can be eliminated, then at least step by step, the faking is going to be done.
Last year, police confiscated over 300 forged driving permits. Tougher road operations have now been put in place to arrest more unlicensed drivers.
People have no driving permits. People are driving with expired permits. People are driving out of class. And we have those people who are driving without, they have never acquired any permit. They are driving.
According to the Uganda Police traffic reports, over 3,600 people lost their lives in road traffic accidents last year. Ensuring that all drivers are trained and can legally use the road, they say, will help reduce the number of cases. Leon Senyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Meanwhile, in South Africa, more than 14,000 people were killed on the country's roads last year, a figure that almost matches the years before. The country's president has stepped in, calling on drivers to change their attitude to road safety. Angela Coppola has more.
South Africa leads the way when it comes to the number of people killed, maimed or injured on its country's roads. And there appears to be one common denominator that's causing the accidents:
When you look at Africa, we are the least motorized continent in the world, yet we have the highest per capita road deaths. So it is a major problem. 98% of all road crashes are a result of human factors. So when we look at weather conditions or we look at road conditions, they play less of a role than human factors. And those human factors are distracted driving, drunk driving, not paying attention to the road.
There's a deeper societal issue that has to do with a culture of lawlessness.
The heart of road safety in this country comes down to you can drive a vehicle in this country unlicensed, without a driver's license and an unroadworthy car, and the chances of you getting away scot-free for years on end is very high.
The South African government and its Department of Transport spends millions of dollars annually on road safety campaigns that are only focused on the two traditional holiday seasons.
Another reason, obviously, is that there is a very dire need for more intervention at a younger level. So we need children to be educated about road safety. We need teenagers to be educated about road safety. And there is a gap there, and that really does need to be sorted out.
In order to tackle the deathly low levels of road safety, government is set to introduce a demerit system in June next year, which deducts points off the driver's license until that person's license is either suspended or cancelled.
We have reservations about that. We think the system is more geared towards revenue collection than promoting road safety, and that certainly is something that needs to be looked at a little more intensively.
So we believe it's going to fail. Sadly, government is not listening again. They make this mistake over and over again, and it's certainly not going to tackle road safety. It is going to make a lot of money for the RTA and government, and that we believe is its motive and incentive as opposed to dealing with the road safety issues.
Road safety is all about driver attitude and driver behaviour, and then legislation kicks in then to enforce bad behaviour or attitudes. In South Africa, that's not happening on all three fronts. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Randburg, South Africa.
You're watching Africa Live. Your business news up next. Coming up, Nigeria's central bank releases $1.7 billion in loan facilities for farmers in the country. And we bring you a look at the ongoing Tunisia International Auto and Automotive Technology Exhibition.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice. Nigeria's central bank has released a total $1.7 billion in a loan facility for farmers in the country over a 10-year period. The loan is promoted under the Commercial Agriculture Credit Scheme established in 2009. The government's focus on agriculture is aimed at addressing Nigeria's economic diversification agenda. But how impactful has this credit scheme been for farmers in the country? CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam has more.
Chukwudi runs a farm here in the Nigerian capital, Abuja. He's got a piggery, fishery and seedling farm. Although a new venture at just 2 years, he's been looking to scale up his business. It's a passionate plan to help boost the nation's food security, but funding has been a major constraint, and it's been difficult accessing government loans.
I applied, I have my loan officer come here, do assessment, supervise the farm, told me it's pretty viable and all that for the fishery segment. That's what I applied for. But you could, imagine that between March, when I applied, 2017 till date, it's still being processed. You understand? So, and I have friends in BOA that will tell you, that's Bank of Agri, that will tell you that, hey, the funds have been, that they hear, they tell me that they hear that funds have been disbursed actually to the banks, but they don't get to see it.
Government has been looking to diversify its monolithic economy. shifting focus from crude oil to agriculture. Since 2009, it has released nearly $1.7 billion as loan to farmers. Aside the bottlenecks in accessing loans, farmers say flood, insecurity, weak infrastructure are among some of the challenges they face in the sector. And experts here say much more is required to further boost the sector.
The agricultural need of this country is far, far above this amount of money. And so this is only like a scratch to what we need to do in agriculture. Agriculture is a very capital-intensive sector and requires a whole lot of money to be able to get it to where we need to be.
But that's not all. There's need for proper supervision of loan disbursements.
My concern and the concerns of other Nigerians is the fact that you'll be shocked to know that a greater proportion and percentage of this amount of money mentioned may not have gone to the real farmers themselves. They may have been diverted to other users for some other purposes.
Under the scheme, the central bank confirms that over 9,500 farmers would benefit from $3.4 million loan in the third quarter of this year. 49% will go to food crops, 18.9% to mixed crops, and the rest to livestock, fisheries, and others. Farmers like Chukudi are hopeful that this time round they would have access to the loans to help boost production. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Austerity is over and the focus is now on productivity. That's the message Zimbabwe's Finance Minister Mthuli Ncube sought to deliver in his 2020 budget presentation last week. However, not everyone is quite as enthusiastic as the minister. Here's CGTN's Farai Mokutuya with more.
Finance Minister Mthuli Ncube believes Zimbabwe's economy will rebound in 2020. However, some feel his ambitious projections are short on detail.
Currently, we're talking of capacity utilization levels in industries well below 50%, simply because of the electricity challenge. So really, those are the factors that I was expecting to see from the budget to say, how are we going to address this electricity supply gap? How are we going to deal with debts around ESCOM?
Despite calling it a people's budget, Professor Mthuli Ncube's pronouncement did little to address the very real and pressing challenges Zimbabweans face day to day, chief amongst which is trying to access cash.
The issuance of $30 million in new currency hasn't satisfied demand.
They promised us that there will be plenty of cash in the bank, but we still haven't seen it. I have been all day and I'm still waiting. I'm about to collapse from hunger.
She will only cheer the budget if it reins in spiraling inflation, she says.
The money I want to withdraw can only buy one or two things because everything is now expensive. I want the government to do something to make things affordable again.
Scrapping of subsidies on maize and wheat could mean higher prices though. Raising of tax-free thresholds should put a little more money in people's pockets, while jobs are to be created through incentives for businesses to employ youths.
It's probably a step in the right direction, especially when then you consider the social effects of having unemployment rate at 95%. There are also socio-economic risks at the same time. Youth are not employed, they're not active, and that's probably a first step to say, let's come up with this venture capital fund.
The budget deficit is projected at 1.5% of GDP on the back of government cost containment. Farai Mokutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
The International Auto and Automotive Technology Exhibition is currently underway in Tunisia. Many Chinese automakers are exhibiting their latest models for the Tunisian and Greater African market. Here's Adnan Chouachi with more details.
The event is organized by the Tunis International Fairs Company in partnership with the Tunisian Automotive Association and the Technical Center for Mechanical and Electrical Industries and the Ministry of Industry.
Chinese automakers are the guests of this special edition. Chinese cars are sold everywhere around the globe because they are safe and use the latest technology.
Many consumers have booked their Chinese cars from local dealers. Tunisians have cited compelling reasons for opting for made-in-China auto brands.
I have bought a Chinese car from the fair. There's no difference between German, French and Chinese cars in terms of safety or comfort. The made in China is a guarantee of international standards, design and quality.
Auto experts assert that Chinese cars are gaining in popularity in the Tunisian and African markets.
The quality materials, the competitive price, the options, as well as the availability make Chinese cars a good alternative to traditional automakers in the region and the African market.
Tunisia Automotive Exhibition has brought together nearly 90 Tunisian and foreign exhibitors, more than 5,000 professional visitors, including a significant number of international dealers from the Maghreb, Arab, African countries and China.
Chinese car manufacturers have developed several partnership agreements with Tunisian companies to produce and distribute their products. According to the Minister of Industry, Tunisia aims to become a platform for the manufacture and export of Chinese cars. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
In 2016, Egypt allocated an estimated $1.3 billion for small and medium enterprises. Most of the funds were earmarked for projects in rural areas, and as part of the initiative, officials have since been encouraging women and youth to venture into entrepreneurship. CGTN's Yasser Hakim visited one project in a village on the outskirts of Cairo.
Al-Haraniya is a small village known as a hub for handmade carpet weaving, and most of the businesses in this area are owned by women.
When I was young, I used to watch my aunt weaving carpets. I liked it, and I learned the art as I grew. I have worked 40 years in weaving. With the experience and partnerships with neighbors, we ended up with this project.
The government has been providing low interest rates and long repayment plans for loans to SMEs. This has allowed the women to purchase the necessary equipment and raw material.
We gather the necessary wool. We choose the design we will work on, then the colors, and start working on it. The paint, by the way, we plant it outside, so the color is produced here as well. The design I'm working on has palm trees, rivers, and plants.
Handmade carpets are more of an art than a business. It requires talent, experience, and patience. That's why carpets don't come cheap.
The handmade carpet takes a long time to produce. This one is a 1-meter carpet and it took 6 months. I only produce 2 carpets per year, but people love them, especially abroad for export. Princess Diana visited us when I was young, and she was impressed with our work and bought from us.
The ladies say this business has provided a living for them and income for their families. Now they're trying to hand over their knowledge to the next generations.
This generation is in a hurry. They want instant success and results, but our craft needs a lot of patience and learning. So it is really hard to find youngsters who would be interested to learn. They don't have patience.
Because of carpet weaving, I managed. We have a decent living. All my kids went to school. My son is even doing his master's. Unfortunately, none of them wants to take over the project.
But for now, they continue their craft, hoping to grow and expand in the next few years. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Rangers awarded for fighting illegal wildlife trade at the 2nd African Ranger Awards ceremony in Accra.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
to bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
The second African Ranger Awards ceremony was held in Accra, Ghana. 10 rangers on the continent were rewarded for their dedication and commitment to fighting poaching and illegal wildlife trade. The awards are sponsored by the Alibaba Foundation in collaboration with the Paradise International Foundation. CGTN's Penina Karibe was there and brought us this following report.
It was a ceremony to honor selflessness and celebrate the great efforts being made on a daily basis to protect Africa's wildlife. This was the second session of the African Ranger Awards, a ceremony set up to recognize and support the achievements and efforts of African rangers to combat poaching, habitat loss and illegal wildlife trade. The African Rangers Awards were established back in July 2017 by the founder of Alibaba Group and board member of the Paradise International Foundation, Jack Ma.
For a picture, please.
The award seeks to identify 500 dedicated rangers over the course of 10 years and will provide grants totaling $1.5 million. For the rangers, the job is a daily sacrifice, a choice between life and death. A survey in 2016 showed that in Africa, 82% of the rangers have faced mortal danger on the job, and over 60% of the rangers were attacked directly by poachers.
So this year, we just launched Africa Ranger Family Supporter Plan to support your families. We hope that all the heroes, you're bleeding, but we don't want your family also crying because of the poverty and no jobs.
That will go a long way in supporting the families of Africa's rangers, some of whom spent many of their years away from their loved ones. Africa is the world's richest continent in terms of wildlife, yet this treasure is getting depleted every year. At present, the population of the African elephant is declining at a rate of 30,000 per year. Gorillas and rhinos too are on the verge of extinction, and forums such as this one are providing an opportunity to preserve this precious heritage.
China has a population of 1.4 billion and is the world's second largest economy. If China and the Chinese people want to do something, if China and the Chinese people devote to some causes, that one will surely achieve success.
It may be a long while before this war is won, but these are necessary efforts towards that victory. Penina Karibe, CGTN, in Accra, Ghana.
Time for a short break. Your sports news up next. Coming up, Uganda hosts Malawi in the second round of qualifiers after a draw against Burkina Faso.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, in your sports news, Uganda hosts Malawi in their Group B Africa Cup of Nations qualifier this Sunday.